Marshall has a JD from the University of Virginia Law School and a PhD in political science from Northwestern University. She's currently associate professor of sociology and law at the University of Illinois. Her research focuses on governance and policymaking on the environmental issues associated with agriculture. She's working on several projects on the adoption of innovative technologies and best management practices to address nutrient loss in Western waters and the role of voluntary policies in promoting such adoption. So take it away, Anna Marie.
Thank you. I hope you didn't overpromise on big energy. Um, I am going to keep my remarks brief because part of the discussion is hopefully getting your input on policy imperatives, policy priorities, and things that are important to you. So we've been talking directly and indirectly about policy and the way that we regulate phosphorus in a variety of different sectors. And so I want to sort of pull back. Yeah, I'm a lawyer, I'm a political scientist, and a sociologist. So I'm going to pull us back a little bit um, to think about policymaking more generally. This is basically the landscape of American policymaking, and we are a federal system. We have federal, state, and local governments, and then each of those national, state, and local governments has three separate branches of legislatures, executives, and judiciaries. I am here to remind everybody that lawsuits are regulation too. And so basically what this is controlled chaos. It's controlled chaos, and it's designed that way back in the 18th century. That's what the founders wanted. They wanted separate power, no power being controlled in any one place, right? So, and we are living through that right now. And of course, we also have to keep a global perspective. The United States is not the only government that is trying to regulate flows of phosphorus. Our partners in Canada and Mexico, they also have federal systems where they are enjoying some of their own controlled chaos. We heard about the European Union and all of its different member states. There's China, right? There's a lot of policy getting made, and it's not getting made all in one place. And so we have to keep that in mind as we search for strategies to regulate phosphorus. Here in the United States, we regulate phosphorus in all the different ways: federal, state, local government, legislation, regulation. But as we've heard over the course of the day, the phosphorus does not fit neatly into any one policy environment. It is regulated by agriculture policy, trade policy, foreign affairs, food and drug regulation, right? And of course, there's environmental policy. Environmental policy in the United States is an example of command and control regulation, what we in the social sciences refer to as command and control regulation, where we have a central authority, the EPA, that is endowed with power to regulate water quality, air pollution, and the EPA issues regulations to help control that. But the effort, water quality regulation by the EPA, is a really good example of all the limitations of command and control regulation. And these limitations are just some that I came up with in the abstract. I thought of more while listening to the talks today. So first of all, regulatory authorities at the EPA, they can't keep up with the science, right? Innovation moves very quickly and regulation moves kind of slow. And Emily, your point about why orthophosphate because it's easy, right? And there may be plenty of more innovative strategies for regulating that, but EPA can't keep up, right? So um, that's one problem. Another problem is that there are actually limited resources and capacity for enforcement. I know a lot of industries feel like they are overregulated, but there just isn't that much in the way of enforcement of a lot of that regulation. And it's also hard to develop coherent regulatory strategies, right? So for the EPA, we have restrictive regulations and permitting processes controlling drinking water and stormwater. We have literally no environmental regulation of non-point sources. They are completely exempt from the Clean Water Act, right? That's kind of incoherent, right? In addition, and Emily's presentation again was a great example, even where we regulate point sources, we don't necessarily have a coherent strategy because we're pushing phosphorus into the water system at one end and then trying to extract it at another, right? And then finally, there are the political obstacles. The photographs you see here are depictions of the jurisdictional problems that we have with command and control regulation. The photos are of the dead zone in the Gulf. The map at the top is of the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. There are a lot of things causing that dead zone, but one of them is nutrient loss, including phosphorus in the Corn Belt. Right? Now, what jurisdiction controls that? Look at that map, right? That is probably 20 different states, all the different counties in the states, all the different watersheds in those states, right? And if you were tempted to ask who's in charge, the answer to that question is like no one, right? Sure, there's the Hypoxia Task Force, but the Hypoxia Task Force pushes all responsibility for this down to the states. Every state reacts very differently. Illinois' way of dealing with this is very different than Iowa's, which is really different than Minnesota's, right? And so that's a political obstacle. How do we get everybody together? And another one political solution here in the United States might be to apply the Clean Water Act to agriculture and non-point sources, which I'm getting old. I don't expect that to happen in my lifetime, right? Now, I just want to make a pitch for my colleagues at STEPS and the way that we are incorporating policy-related research into the STEPS Center. First of all, we have an amazing group of modelers. I hope you all get to meet them sometime over the next few days, that are building really complex models of environmental outcomes that capture all these different potential effects of, innovative technology being applied to the problem, as well as different portfolios of policy. So that, and social trends and environmental issues. So, and hopefully those models will give us some insights on the directions that we can go. I myself am working on some case studies of STEPS technologies in particular that try to capture the specific policy environments where these innovative technologies can thrive, right? And we see lots of obstacles to adoption that are sometimes erected through public policy, but we see lots of opportunities as well. And I have to say, I'm always looking for a good lawsuit. If you know about a good lawsuit, I love lawsuits. Come talk to me. And then we have long-term plans, looking for more cooperative situations, more collective governance plans that bring stakeholders together in the way that Ludwig described, where stakeholders themselves can make commitments to make change, right? And then be accountable for keeping those commitments. So, one last thing before I turn things over to you and hopefully hear questions and comments, um, is introduce you for the first time to this roadmap that you'll be getting to know a little bit better tomorrow. This maps out lots of different sectors that have to be involved in the effort to make phosphorus more sustainable. These areas implicate lots of different policy environments, right? But as we've been hearing all day, this is going to be a team effort that's going to require cooperation across not just lots of different countries, but lots of different sectors as well. So hopefully you'll be using this roadmap to tell us something about how we can start making policy work in the sector that you're most interested in. Hopefully we can open this up to a more general dialogue about what kinds of policies we might need to make phosphorus more sustainable. Could a platform like the one that's in Europe, could that be helpful for us? And any other questions that you might have. Thank you. And hopefully I'm not the only one who's answering, right?
One of your questions about the platform, and I think what turned out extremely useful in our work in Europe was that we as a platform have the industry as members, but we take not the industry position when we talk to the regulators. We advocating phosphorus stewardship. In several cases, this might be represented by the regulator's position. In other cases, it might be represented by the industry position. So regulators tell us, and I think this is a good feedback, that they like to work with us because we also point at the insufficiencies and inconsistencies and problems of the products that are proposed. Not only, we don't present always the bright side of everything.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How does industry feel about you taking their dues and then not always representing them to regulators?
In general, quite well. So
Okay.
they are cooperative. We don't have specific problems. So I think it's liked. I mean, there are some industry representatives from Europe here. They may contradict me, but so far they haven't done it.
You can talk to me later.
So we have one question that came in through Mentee. It says, any thoughts to interposing your roadmap with the food value chain from production inputs to consumer food waste?
It's not my roadmap. Carrie?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. We're definitely going to talk more about that tomorrow and kind of connect that kind of brief representation of P-flow through a chain that Anna Maria showed with a larger, kind of more complicated representation of the P-flow that does sort of start from mining and flow through food and consumption and think about waste issues as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Or I had a question now that I've got the microphone.
Well,
so one of the things that I found myself thinking about in a couple of the talks this morning was the difference in the challenge that we face compared to plastic waste, right? Which is much more visible, much more tangible, Europe has started to see movement on extended producer responsibility regulations. A number of states in the US have started to take action. I wonder, what are ways that we can up the visibility, the tangibility of phosphorus? And you don't have to answer, Anna Maria.
Thank
Others can and should answer it.
you. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Because just one other thing. I mean, one of the keys to getting new people to adopt innovative technologies is that they've got to see that it matters, right? They have to understand that you are asking me to incur costs. You are asking me to buy a different fertilizer. You're asking me to install a bioreactor. Before I do all that, you have to convince me that it's actually going to matter. And that convincing people that it matters requires our modelers and requires data and graphics, and that's a puzzle. So
hello, just one example from the United Kingdom, actually from Wales, that's going on at the moment. We've got a particularly interesting phosphorus thing that's gravitated around phosphorus levels in the River Wye and the rivers of Wales. And what's happened is it's prohibited planning and building because it's exceeded the nutrient requirements for planning and for building. And this has woken everyone up because phosphorus is the thing which is prohibiting it. And it's made the national television news at 6 o'clock. It's like right at the top of the BBC. I've been involved a little bit. Others have been involved. And, it just takes one or two little things to get it all going. If people can't build houses, all of a sudden, this is a really serious issue. And it suddenly brings everyone out. You know what I mean? So that's an example.
Can I ask a question, a follow-up question? Is there a national standard for phosphorus levels in rivers, for example?
Well, the standards at the moment are based on the guidelines historically from the European Water Framework Directive. That's basically the guidelines which the UK is currently working to. Okay. But there are all sorts of different guidelines and laws which come in, and if there's building legislation and suddenly a builder can't do something, then that suddenly triggers a whole new perspective on the issue. Gotcha. And that's the way in that suddenly got everyone awake.
Right.
You have a question right here.
So I actually have a follow-up to sort of what we've been talking about in terms of telling stories and getting this, raising the visibility on this. I'm in STEPS, I'm at Appalachian State. We teach a undergraduate class on phosphorus and sort of the challenge of this. And we brought in someone from the university who does public interest communication, who does science communication in particular. I don't know if there's someone in STEPS who's already doing that, but if she is, if she's interested in doing this, if she's interested in referring people to us, that might be a way to sort of at least get someone with some experience on this, is sort of to make sure we're telling stories and not relying on the facts to do the talking for us, that we're actually sharing stories that resonate with the audiences we're trying to reach.
Yeah, I think telling stories is a huge part. The public doesn't really care about data most of the time. They care about a story. The Cuyahoga River sold the Clean Water Act.
Right.
Harmful algal blooms are burning rivers. They will sell why this matters to the public when dogs are dying, people are getting sick. They're finding toxins airborne 10 miles from harmful algal bloom lakes. These are the things that the public will care about, that will ultimately drive the water quality restoration side of this piece. So I agree, sir, that telling a story is the best way to get the public on our side as far as the water quality restoration side. And harmful algal blooms are a very visible, impactful thing. I mean, we see them in the national news on almost a daily basis now. So.
Can I interrupt here for a second? We have Dan Egan here, and he's a journalist for the Milwaukee Sentinel and has written a book or two. And I think he has some pretty good perspective on storytelling. And so I just wanted to give him a chance to chat for a second about that.
Okay, I wasn't expecting this, but yeah, it is about to get the public in tune with what you, all the work, the good work that you people are doing is to convey it through stories. I wrote a book, it's called Devil's Element, Phosphorus in a World Out of Balance. It'll come out in March of 2023, and it was spun out of a book that I did 5 years earlier on called Death and Life of the Great Lakes, where I focused on a chapter on Lake Erie and what was happening with the algae. I know it's algal, but I call them algae blooms. And I got a lot of feedback from that. And you're right as far as the health impacts, whether it's a dog or whether it's, you know, some concerns, some emerging concerns about neurological issues with people who live on and near infested lakes. These are issues that matter to people. They have a hard time grasping our charts and data points. It is about stories. It's about communicating, and that's what I tried to do with this book. I'm not up here to sell it, but I do agree that with the work you guys do with your students in your labs, with your organizations, it's great. But it's also imperative that gets out to the public and they receive it in a way that they can digest it and feel vested in the issue, because we all are. Most of us don't know it right now. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions about.
Yeah, this is Ed Weinberg, Esri. So I have similar comments about getting the story out, and it's all in messaging. And in one word, it's buzzwords. So we've already mentioned a few buzzwords like microplastics and soil health, regenerative agriculture, climate change through carbon dioxide emissions. Every STEPS researcher should be trying to make a connection of phosphorus with these buzzwords. Now, microplastics might be a stretch, but certainly soil health and even carbon dioxide emission reduction, I think are possible. And that's how we get our phosphorus story across, by latching on to these other buzzwords. Thank you.
I was just going to jump in and take off my water quality lake protection hat and put on the other side of the coin, right? The other stories are stories of starvation and malnutrition, right? And those are terrible stories of the present and the past, right? So that's our challenge, right? So we can't just pretend that phosphorus is a problem everywhere all the time, right? We have to also recognize that phosphorus is essential for the health and well-being of billions of people on Earth. And so the story is essentially hard, right? There's two very compelling sides of it, and finding the way forward to tell those in a humane and generous way is the challenge, because it's easy to run around with your hair on fire that our water is going, into the toilet, I guess is one way to say it. But it's harder to sort of say, yes, we have that problem, but we still have to feed people. And we need to feed people, not corn ethanol, right? We need to feed not people, not animals necessarily. We need to feed people healthy and nutritious food. And telling that story along with the challenge of the other side is the thing that I find so amazingly difficult about this enterprise that we're invested in this week.
I always wonder, what did we do to have a success story for non-smoking? I think this was one of the great success stories of the last 10 or 20 years, where 20 years ago everybody was smoking. In a conference like this, half of us would have been downstairs smoking, and now none is doing it. And what was the difference? Because smoking is a health issue, it's a human issue. There was a strong lobbying in favor of smoking. So I think we have a similar situation, and we managed it one times, and I wonder what we could have learned from this.
So lawsuits are an important part of that. But I also I want to say that the storytelling is great. I am a lawyer, a sociologist, and a political scientist, but I'm married to an economist. So I'm going to dampen this a little bit with an economic insight. The way we did it with smoking is we got the public message out: you're killing yourself. You will die if you continue to smoke. And we made that very, very graphic, right? Some of the problems with the storytelling of phosphorus are going to Iowa and Illinois farmers and saying to them, don't put down so much fertilizer because you're killing off the fishing industry in the Gulf of Mexico. Storytelling is incredibly important. But we also have to make sure, and I think this was Jim's part, that we tell those stories to get people to empathize with others, to make the farmers in Iowa and Illinois care about the fishermen in the Gulf of Mexico. And I actually think the algal blooms are, I only recently started saying algal. I used to say algae all the time. So the algal blooms are a nice example of bringing it home, right? Like, yeah, okay, the Gulf of Mexico is dying, but you can't go fishing because of the algal blooms, right?
Yeah, I think connecting those dots is really important. But when I was doing the research for this book, the one dot that just really jumped out at me, and I can't get it out of my head, are the ethanol numbers. And it's like 40% of the national crop, and I think it's over 50% in Iowa. It's going to a demonstrably inefficient, arguably profoundly damaging enterprise. And we're locked into this politically right now because of the way the Iowa caucuses work. If you want to do well in the presidential campaigns, you got to do well in Iowa. And if you want to do well in Iowa, you got to bow to the ethanol god. And it's disheartening. But these are the stories that people need to understand, that those rows and rows of corn are not going to feed people. And, maybe it makes more sense just to put some solar panels out there and cut out the middleman. I don't know. But I do think it is a folly that we're undertaking right now with the ethanol program. And that's one big thing that if you could get people to understand, you could move the ball a little bit. So that's a thought.
Okay. So me and Brittany over here talking, whispering in the back. Do we have a marketing team? I like your point. I'm here in the back. I like your point with smoking and how we've kind of canceled that out of culture. But in my very young and humble opinion, I think fear mongering only gets you so far. And I think how we phased out smoking is by making smoking uncool rather than by making people afraid. Because when you go to the UK, they have cancer on their packs, and everybody that I met there takes smoke breaks all throughout the day to this day. So how do we make phosphorus sustainability cool, if that makes sense? And that's an open question for the room. I feel like that's our way. Yeah.
All right, that was fantastic. That's making phosphorus sustainability cool. That's our job. Now, wow, what a great way to wrap things up. Thank you for that. Thank you, Anna Marie. Appreciate it. So I just want to wrap things up here.